Don't be committed to a guru. Be committed to your own spiritual path. In the end, it matters what you're committed to. If you're committed to your pride or to your accomplishment, well, to put a lot of discipline on that is a good way to exhaust that, and then you find out what it really is that you're committed to. I was reading about a very interesting experiment that actually inspired me to do this talk. The experiment went like this. There were two groups of people, and both of these groups were given paintings. And the one group, they could keep the painting they were given. And the other group, they could exchange the painting for another painting. So the interesting result of the experiment was that the people that were allowed to keep the painting that they were given, they were delighted with the painting that they had for the most part. But the people that were allowed to exchange their painting for another one, they were kind of disappointed. They weren't as happy as the people that were given one painting and no possibility for an exchange. And I think that says something very important about commitment and about happiness. When you think about people in your environment, when I think about people in my environment, that I know they have lots of partners, for example, then they're never happy. It may seem from the surface that they're having a blast having so many partners, but in fact they're unhappy. It really pays off to be invested in one person or in one activity or in one idea. And I think that's what commitment is about. So when you start working on a spiritual path, pretty soon you'll encounter this idea of commitment, because it's very, very important. I would say it's one of the fundamental keys to spiritual development is this commitment. And I think one of the major pitfalls or downfalls that many people are having is that they read something here or they read something there. They do a little practice here, they follow a YouTube meditation there, and they're like spiritual window shopping and never really sticking with anything. And you know why I think that is? I think it's not because we're not committed, but just because we're overwhelmed with choices. We never know what to choose, and when we choose something, we're always feeling that we're missing out on something else that we're not doing. It's kind of a spiritual FOMO, you could call it. It's like fear of missing out on something else that you could be doing. But I think the key to spiritual development is really to take something and then stick to it and work to the end of it. You could say that if you're spiritually window shopping, you're also committed, but you're committed to your curiosity. You're committed to following your own mental restlessness. So we have commitments, we have things that we are committed to, but we're not conscious to many of these things. And I think the whole business of spiritual development is really about changing these subconscious commitments to conscious commitments. So you know what you're committing to, you know what you're doing it for. Subconsciously, you could be committed to anything. You could be committed to smoking, to fighting with your partner. You could be committed to overworking. Very many things. And most people are committed to many things, but they're just not aware of that. So I think this is the main thing. So sticking to something is very, very important. And in fact, it might be more important to stick to something than what it is that you're sticking to. They did some research and they investigated long-term meditators. And as you may know, that meditation changes your brain in a good way. So they compared these long-term meditators' brains with the brains of people who didn't meditate. And they found all these surprising happy changes in the brains of these meditators. But what is the interesting thing about that is that they had no way of ascertaining what brought about these changes. Was it the meditation, or was the fact that they committed to something and did that every day? Was that the thing that brought about the happy changes in the brain? So it was really a question of, did those happy changes in the brain come about by the meditation, or did they come about by sticking to the meditation? In other words, by their long-term commitment. In the end, it's difficult to tell the difference between those two things. So when you're starting out with this notion of commitment, it doesn't really matter what you are committing to. It's just important that you show up, because the first task, in a way, is to become more integrated with yourself. So if you decide on the one hand that you're going to commit to something, and then the next day you have to get up really early and you do that thing, that's fine because you're enthusiastic about the commitment. But then the second morning, when you have to get up really early and do that thing, it might not be so easy, and there might be a part of you that says, well, you know, I want to stay in bed, or something like that. So that's a non-integrated part. It's like one part of you agrees that they want to do this commitment, but then there's this other part of you that revolts against that commitment, and that's the whole game, really. So in the beginning, I'd say it's important that you stick to something. The classic example is that you have a stone, and you put this stone on your nightstand, and every day you turn this stone like for 1/4, and every day you do this, and it may seem like a very small thing, but it grows on you, because there is this one thing that you need to turn this stone every day. It means that your life is getting a different kind of axis. You know, your life starts turning around something else. You decide what your life is going to start to turn around. You always decide that, and you have always decided that, except in many cases it's just for the wrong things. You decide that your life turns around your boyfriend or your girlfriend, or your computer or your smartphone or your guitar or whatever. You decide many things what life turns around. But first step, accept that there is a meaning in sticking to something, and it doesn't matter what it is. So it's just kind of an agreement with yourself, like, I'm going to turn this stone every day, and that's what I'm going to do. The other thing you could do, for example, is you just light a candle, and you light a candle every day, and that's what your life starts turning around. But I do implore you to do that only for a particular time, because if you just light a candle every day, it's like eventually it just sort of devolves into a meaningless ritual if you have no idea what you want to accomplish with that, because there is something always to be accomplished. There is a goal that you're not doing anything for nothing, or you're not just doing it for the love of the world. Eventually that's what spiritual practice is about, but that's not how you start. You start by defining something, like, I'm going to light this candle for 40 days in a row. And then after 40 days you've accomplished that, then you can choose something else that you're going to commit yourself around. And I think that touches on like the next point, which is that commitment shouldn't be about meaningless discipline. So don't confuse discipline with commitment. Discipline can be part of commitment, but it's not the same. You can be committed, and discipline can be part of that, but it doesn't have to be. So story that I always tell is about a friend I have in Germany who went to do this really, really hard sadhana, really hard spiritual practice. It's like 2.5 hours of a very hard yoga kriya, a yoga set. And it's almost, when I think about it, it's almost impossible to do. But he did it, and I think he did it for 90 days or something like this. Very, very long time. And he then went to his guru, his master, and he said, "Look, I did this 90 days of this really hard yoga kriya. So what's next? What do you recommend now I do?" And the guru said, "Do it again." And then, of course, he had to really recover from that, because it was so hard to do that. And then the second time he tried it, it was very hard for him to get started. And at some point he pulled his arms up, and he wanted to go into this kriya, into this yoga set, but he couldn't, and he just broke down in tears. And that's when he finally learned the message, you could say. So in the end, it matters what you're committed to. If you're committed to your pride, or to your accomplishment, or to your pride of accomplishment, well, to put a lot of discipline on that is a good way to exhaust that, and then you find out what it really is that you're committed to. Through the discipline, you learn what it is to refine your intention, and you learn what it really is that you're committed to, but you just have to start practicing to find out, really. Well, what I could say is that it's not a good idea to be necessarily committed to the practice, or it's not a good idea to be committed to what anybody says, or even to anybody. When it comes to spiritual teachings, I've seen lots of people, they're committed to their teacher, or to their spirituality, or to their religion. This is absolutely wrong. The way you should be committed is to your own self, is to you. Commitment is to you, not to anybody else. If you're committed to somebody else, you open yourself up to abuse, to the worst things that can happen. It will be a learning. It will be a learning school, but it's not a... I wish for you to avoid that learning school. Don't be committed to a guru. Be committed to your own spiritual path. Be committed to your own happiness. Be committed to your own balance. Be committed to your own presence. Be committed to your own awareness. Be committed to your own spiritual maturity. Be committed to your own integrity. There are so many things that you can be committed to that are commitments to yourself. So what should you do? What should I do? So what should you do? Well, it's up to you. As I said, you can turn a stone every day to get into this habit of commitment. But the reason that yoga is good is that yoga sort of automatically places you in contact with your own body. And there are other physical disciplines that can do that, but they can also distract you. In the sense that if you just do a workout because of the workout, and you have no consciousness of your body and of the energies of your body, but you just want to sweat, that's fine. But you're satisfying a biological urge, and you're not doing a spiritual practice. Spiritual practice starts with being aware of your emotions, how your body's functioning, how your energy is functioning. That's what spiritual practice is. If you're doing it right, yoga is always a meditation. It's not a workout, it's a meditation. If you're doing it right, even working out in the gym can be a meditation, or running can also be a meditation. Choice is up to you. But what I would say, one of the important things is, one of the things that always inspired me is this one saying I got from a book called Undoing Yourself by Christopher Hyatt, which was the one thing that put me on a spiritual path so many years ago. It's kind of a weird book, But one of the things he says, and he says it well, he says, there is only one recipe for success, and that recipe is do it every day. Do it every day. That's it.